Okay, so now we're going to get started right where we left off. We're going to continue working on this site, but I'm going to show you a little bit more about how to add content. So just to recap of where we have created our navigation that collapses and expands. If it's in the way, I can always come back to my master page and collapse it. And then when I go back here, it'll be collapsed, so I can actually do the design elements that I need to do. Now I can't edit that at the moment because that's on the master page. But now that we are done with that, let's go to our gallery page and start adding some of the galleries. So I know I talked a little bit about these galleries before, but I do want to add them back in and show you some of these different widgets and how you might be able to use them to create a slightly more advanced gallery by combining the widgets. So before we get into that, I just want to quickly go back through the panels because I don't think I really introduced that in the last video. Up at the top, we have a lot of our editing panels for the text, our color panel, our swatches, our fill panel, which we can kind of access that information here as well. So if I click this, it will bring up fill in the same way that it's right there. We also have our wrap panel, which deals with text wrapping around objects, spacing, so like padding and gutter, our transform panel, which works a lot like Illustrator, where you can move things to different positions or change their widths and heights and angles, their rotation, and our align panel. We then have our widgets library, our scroll effects, and our states, and then at the bottom our layers, our library, which we don't have anything in at the moment, our assets, which show us all of our images that are connected, our graphic styles, where we can create graphic styles, our character styles, and our paragraph styles. So with these three sections open, you have pretty much everything you need to edit anything you want to edit. So for this purpose, while we're on the gallery page, I'm going to create two different galleries that go inside a composition. So these compositions here, these are like more stripped down widgets. So they give you a little more freedom in how you adjust them. So for example, I have this blank one, I have featured news, a lightbox display that's really simple, a presentation, a state button, and a tooltip. So a state button is something you can create. Let's do a state button first so you can see. So if I have this state button, I can go to states and then I can sort of alter its states. So it's a little easier. So you could actually make this an image. You could do a lot of different things with it, completely change its size, do whatever you wanted, and you could have a really interesting state button. So this could just as easily be a graphic that rolls over and changes that way as well. So it can do a lot of different little elements like that. So you'll notice there's no kind of really immediacy of what I can do to edit this. Like I can't get my little blue triangle to do effects. However, I can add a link. So I can link this some different things, or I can link it to a file. So that doesn't mean that it's useless just because I can't edit internally there. So that's a state button. A presentation, pretty similar. It's essentially a gallery, except it doesn't really have anything built into it yet, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. Lightbox display, same thing. It's a blank lightbox display, but we can grab that from the gallery as well, so I don't want to mess with that. We then have featured news, so I'm assuming this can kind of rotate through some content here, so you can see I can click some different things and bring up this content. I'm going to delete that one again. And now I'm going to insert a blank composition. This is what I actually want to start working with. So this is a blank composition. It has three panels that we can see that when we click them, they bring up a different target object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into a gallery that you can switch between the two different elements, and it'll have two sliders. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to use my line panel to center it, zoom out so I can see a little bit. I'm going to raise the height just a little so we have a little more room. Hold down Option and drag out. It looks like that doesn't work the way that Illustrator does. Pull that down, and then you'll notice my triggers got pushed behind. I'm just going to drop those down here, and I'm going to delete one of these triggers because I don't need 3 sections. I only need 2 sections, so I'll delete that. I can then grab these triggers, change their size. Looks like that one's the one that moved, not this one. Grab that, put that over there. Bring this one back. Kind of adjust those. I can adjust these. If they're not the right size that I want, I can grab them and go to the transform panel and look at the size. So here the width is 455. Let's make that 450, and then we'll match that with the other button here. So now this one is completely different, so we'll put that at 450. And then I'll align them to their edges. Sometimes it's hard to grab hold. And I can even sort of scoot these up and connect them so that they're like tabs if I wanted to. I'm also going to grab them. I'm going to turn off their stroke because I do not want a stroke on those. I'm going to do the same thing here. And then I'm going to grab these panels as well and remove the stroke. Just because I want these to be really simple, really clear. So I'm removing the stroke there. Sometimes if you grab an object and you go to its states panel, you can check and make sure that you've removed the stroke from all of the states that are visible. So currently we have not. And then normal, 0, do the same for this. Set that to 0, mouse down to 0, roll over to 0, and normal to 0. And the reason you need to come to the states panel for something like this is once I click this object, it triggers it and it puts it into the active phase. It's hard to access, and you can see I still have a stroke there. It's hard to access the others without going to the states panel. So now let's take a look at what this looks like. So I'm going to scoot that up so it kind of butts up against that. Do the same here. And now let's look at this in the preview mode. So let's see. Come on. I think it's loading really slow. There we go. So now we can see I have this section and I can click and I get a nice fade transition from one gallery to the next. I'm going to go back to the design view. And now I can do something that's really neat. So if I want to come in here, I can add text into these buttons and that will help. I can also, I believe, put that in the normal state there. Grab this text and I'll call this traditional. I'm going to edit that text really quick. And let me show you something that's really great that you can do with the text. So if you come into your text and you've chosen your typeface and you've done all sort of different things here and got it exactly as you like. So let's say I want to use Georgia. I want this to be 16 point. I want it to be a very dark gray instead of black. And I want it to be centered, which it is. I can just highlight that text and under character styles or paragraph styles, I can create a style with that. In this case, it's not a paragraph style so much because I didn't really play with any of the leading or those bigger sections there. It's a character style. So I'm just going to hit new character style and it's going to create a character style. I can name this and I can call this like tab style. And then if I go and create another text box here and I type in what was it, traditional and then digital, I can highlight this text and I can just select tab style and it will replicate that style there. So that's a really important thing. So character styles and tab styles will contain different elements in that a paragraph style can contain information about leading, centered, all of that. A character style is just really the typeface choices and the color and things like that. I'm then going to push this down a little bit so I can get to my align panel. I'm going to center that inside the object. I'm going to do the same for this item here. And now, oops, not where I wanted to go. I have the wrong object selected, so let me undo that. I have to get the text box. Align and center. So now they're centered within their tabs. They're ready to go. I'm actually going to push that down just a little bit. Got the wrong thing selected once again. This is the hardest part of dealing with Muse, is getting the right thing clicked. But if that's your only problem, it's not so bad. So those are more aligned now. Now that once I have that done, I'm ready to actually add my galleries in. So I can go back to my widget library and I can select any of the galleries from the slideshows panel. So in this case, I'm going to look through. I have a basic one. I have a blank. I have a full screen. We don't want that because that will fill the whole screen. We have a light box. And we have a thumbnails, and I like the thumbnails one, so I'm just going to drag that in. You can see that this blue line highlights up to tell me it's dropping into that space. And then I can make a few edits before I add my images, so I may want to widen that. Go to my editing here. I'm going to turn off the captions and the counter so that I only have buttons. And I'm going to bring my buttons to the edge. And leave those there. Now you'll notice some things got a little distorted here, and the reason is when I added this large composition inside, it shoved the box open. So now I have to go back through and make a couple little edits here to get it all to fit. So I'm going to try and shrink that back down a little. I'm going to bring my buttons down a little bit more here. So sometimes you are going to have to go through and make some edits. When you add the content, it's kind of the same as in Dreamweaver in that it pushes open the div to contain that content. So in this case, I'm actually going to move my buttons up and next to it so I can make just a little bit more room. And then I can grab the whole composition inside there, and I can sort of, oh, wrong section, grab that, sort of scoot that down so it looks a little better there. Now once I've got that edited, all I have to do is grab it. So I got to select it again. Keep an eye on which tabs are opening up. You see these little dotted lines with the X's? That kind of shows you that you've grabbed that whole widget. Open that up, hit Add Images, and I can grab whatever images I need to add. So I'm going to grab these from this letterpress folder. Click Open. It will generate new thumbnails for these, and this will be ready to function. So I can actually click this and make sure that it's all connected and working right there. Now that being done, I can actually grab the widget again. So I got to click inside, copy it, come to the digital, select inside, and paste this item. And now I have matching widgets. You can see that they move, so that actually can be a problem. So let's try pasting it in place instead. So I could move them over using my transform panel to get them in the right spot, but in this case I'm going to hit paste in place and I'm going to see if that will solve the problem. So there we go. You can actually see when I switch back and forth the background color is changing and the image sits exactly in the same spot. That's kind of important. You don't want things scooting all over the page. Now that being said, I simply want to add new images instead or delete the images I currently have and add new ones. So I'm clicked in the wrong thing. There we go. And I'm going to add images. So let's go to a different folder. I'm going to grab these holiday cards, select OK. And you'll notice something happens. It didn't delete the old one. So in that case, I just have to go back through and once I manage to click in there, delete the ones I don't want. And I accidentally deleted the whole thing. Once again, clicking is the hardest part, I swear. Once I get those selected, I can then delete the thumbnails I don't want. And I could have done this beforehand. I just wanted to show you sort of what happens. There we go. So now I have these new thumbnails selected there. Now watch what happens. So I should have deleted them first, even though I wanted to show you, because it threw the box open again. So I'm just going to repair that if I can. Let's see. I got to reselect this widget because you can see it threw its boxes a lot larger. So I'm going to shrink those down. There we go. Now I should be able to drop this back up to where it was. And there we go. So that's the hardest part, is kind of editing everything to get it to fit together, but it's still a lot more sensible than going in and doing all the CSS. I think the CSS is more clear, but it can be hard if you're not used to working with it. So this is a little more intuitive in that regard. Now if I go to preview, should load in a moment. There we go. I now have, it looks like I have some alignment issues I'm going to have to fix. There's a little gap right there. But I can click in between the traditional and the digital, and I now have a really great thumbnail slideshow. And currently it's set to play on its own, but I could turn that off if I so chose. And you can see this bigger space down here. The reason is because I have my minimum height set to 600 pixels. It just looks a little different here. It's all the same. Nothing's really changed. But you could edit that if you needed to make some adjustments there. So that is how I have added a 2-section gallery. That being done, I can now delete these 2 pages because I don't really want to have them as separate pages. I've managed to incorporate the galleries into one page, and it makes it a little easier to work with. So now I save it, and now let's look at just a couple other things we can do here. So I exited BMaster, I didn't need that. On the home page, I may want to put another slider of work, so I may want to actually take, let's see, I'll probably do a really simple one. I'll probably put a blank slideshow in, or a basic one. Scoot that up. Once again, edit the size here so that I have kind of like an opening slideshow to sort of play with. I'm going to go to edit here, and I'm going to turn off the previous, the next, the captions, and the counter. I want this just to play on its own. I can actually change the fit content proportionally and fill frame proportionally. I'm going to keep those back on fill frame. I just wanted to show you you can do that. And I can turn off autoplay. In this case, I do want autoplay to happen. So I'm going to hit add images. And this time I'm going to go to a different one. I believe I have some in stationery. And I'm just going to grab a whole slew of these. Click OK. It's going to load the 22 files. And there we go. So because I have it set to fill frame proportionally, they do fill the frame proportionally. I'm going to make my transition speed and my autoplay a little faster just so you can see. I mean, I don't think you want to rush your slideshows, but I'm going to scoot that down, and then I'm going to add some text for this. So I'm going to say, welcome to Panthera Press. I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to get my text situated the way I want, and then I'm going to make it into a character style. So we're going to do pretty much everything here. So hopefully this walks you through the full breadth of doing this website. So if I choose a typeface from my computer like this one, it's not very attractive typeface for this, but you get the idea. So if I grab this, take my cursor, pull that open, I can actually place that up here in the header section if I want. So maybe I will. Maybe I'll make this just a little bit smaller. Ooh, too small. Let's make it 24. There we go. So let's say that that's what I'm looking for. It's probably not what I'm looking for, but we get the idea there. I'm going to set that up here in the header, and I'm going to leave this like this. I might scoot this down just a little bit so that when I open the navigation it won't interfere too much, but I'll save that and we're going to preview it. So this is really easy. I mean, you're able to throw stuff together really quickly. So navigation is kind of dropping behind. And the reason that's happening, and I'm actually having some issues with this getting cut off as well. So let's go back to design and solve some of those problems. So the first is simply that the text box is actually technically, I think it's because it's not quite big enough. Might be that. Let's drop it down here and see if it's just that it's getting cut off. We'll preview again. So it's easy to switch back and forth and kind of check what's happening. So it looks like I'm having some issues with it being cut off. I'll fix that in a moment. I think that has to do with this typeface coming out of the bounding box there and having some issues, but I'll adjust that. So the problem with the navigation is when I click it, it went behind. The reason that is because if you notice, this object is on a layer that is behind the other, or it's in the same layer it looks like as these objects. So these objects will need to move to their own layer. I can do that by selecting my object, actually coming over to this little blue dot and dragging it to a new layer. Now if I put object behind menu at this stage, and you can see that pushed another thing behind it, so I probably need to create a new, I need to move that footer object to its own layer, and I can do that by going back to a master. So this I will put on its own layer, which will be footer objects. You can see the color changes, so that kind of helps you get a handle on what's happening. I'll go back to home. I will select this object again. It's once again on object. Footer objects is below it but above menu. And I want to make sure that this objects panel, which contains this item, goes behind the menu. That way when the menu opens, it should open above it. So let's save it and check out and see that if that worked out the way I wanted. So there we go. So now the menu opens above the object, which is better because that way it's not getting cut off. So let's go back to design. I'm just going to change this typeface. I could probably do something to get it quite like I want, but I'm just going to come back up here and pick something a little nicer. I'll take this Aquafina script, set that up in size a little bit. I'm going to keep that on the menu layer, although I probably would want to create another layer for objects that go above. Center that and kind of just place that wherever I need it to be. So maybe I'll set that there. Let's check and see if that gets cut off. Should be all right. Alright, so there we go. So that looks a lot better. So it was probably some kind of error with that actual typeface and how it was rendering in the box. That was one of those really easy to find typefaces on DaFont. So a lot of times those typefaces aren't well designed and they're missing like pieces of their own code that can be a little confusing. So there we go. So now I have my navigation set. It looks like I'm going to have to come back and edit my navigation a little bit because I'm getting some gaps here, but I'll fix that later. I can go to my gallery. It will open gallery. I can click between, adjust all of this, and then I can go back to my navigation. You can see once again I'm going to have to edit the positioning of these objects because the same problem is happening here. So I can actually go to gallery, make sure that my gallery box, I got to get the whole thing selected, which can sometimes, there we go. So I have the whole composition selected, and I probably want to push that onto the object layer so it goes behind. So you have to come back through and make sure that you do all of your detail checks. That's kind of one of the little features here. So I'm scooting this up so that I'm sure that they're kind of overlapping with the tabs there. I may even want to do something like grab these tabs and add rounded corners to the bottom. Do the same thing here. Kind of adds a little bit of styling there. Let's let's go back to our master and see if we can quickly neaten up our navigation page. So it looks like all I got to do is shrink that down to match. So it looks like I might have got it there. So that already looks a lot better. Let's preview that. There we go. So those are nicely lined up now. So really simple changes. I just needed to adjust the sizing a little bit. Go back to design. Save my site. And now I can go through and add a few other things. I'm going to go back to my master just really quick and collapse that so it's not in the way. Go back here. You can see it collapses on all of the pages. And finally, I want to add a contact form really quick before I save and export this site for the purpose of this video. So in this, I'm actually going to select my object menu so that I know to put the objects behind. And I'm going to collapse some of these items. And I'm going to show you really quick the forms. So there's a detailed contact form, which is really long. It's got a lot of options. You can turn them on and off from this menu. So it's hard to click here. Come here. So if I bring this up, I can open this up and I can turn off some of these more complex options if I want. However, I don't want this one. I'm going to do a simple contact form. Unless you're doing something really complex, this simple contact form is definitely elegant enough. And so from here, I can do a lot of different things, including opening the size of this box. I can move my submit button wherever I kind of want to put it. So if I want to put this here and I want my submit button to actually be over here, I can do that. I can change the sizes. I can adjust that. You can see the composition adjust. I can create this. I can make this line length longer if I have clients with really long names. I'm not sure. Make that longer. Change the size of this. Move the submit button. And I can also style the submit button. So I'm actually going to shrink the size just a little bit. I'm going to give it, it's got rounded corners, it looks like already, but I'm going to increase the size of those to 10. There we go. I'm going to take off the stroke because I don't like the stroke. I'm going to check the states though so that I can make sure I do it on all of them. So roll over has no stroke, mouse down has no stroke, and submit in progress has no stroke. But I do want the normal color to be a little darker, so I'll give it a, oh, I didn't want a stroke. Oops, wrong part. Hit none. I want the fill to be a little darker, so I'm going to fill that a little darker. It's a little too dark to see the type, so let's say that that's kind of what I'm looking for. There we go. Pretty similar to what it was, but you get the idea. So there we go. So now I have a nice simple submit button. I can align that down where I need it. And I can grab this whole composition. It's hard to click here. And I can move that wherever I need to. And maybe if I wanted to insert sort of like a logo, I could place that in here. So I could go place. I could go find a logo, which I believe I have one right here. That one's a JPEG. Let me see if I have a PNG version. It doesn't appear I have a PNG version ready to go, but I'll just place this one. I can place this image right in there. And I could even make this into, I could add states to this right here. So if I wanted it to highlight or change color, something like that, I could do that there. I'm going to grab both of these objects, sort of just scoot them over a little bit. And then I'm going to save it. Now the last thing about this is if you go to this menu, all you have to do to get this contact form to work, which is amazing because you don't have to write any PHP, is write the email that you want it to go to. So if you put Danielle at daniellefeliciano.com, spell my own name right would be nice. And there you go. And you could add other sections as well. So if you wanted to add a custom field that was specific to your website, such as which gallery did you like best, traditional or digital, you could add custom fields to this. So once that's done, we save it. We can preview everything to make sure it works. So I'm going to open up Home. I'm going to hit Preview from there. And it looks like my slider is working. My nav drops in front, nice and even. I can go to Gallery. This additionally works here. Open my nav again. Go to the About Me page, which is currently blank. That's fine. Go to Contact. And that is fine as well. So it looks like, yep, doesn't get blocked by anything. So this is ready to go. We can edit, you can continue to edit states here and all of that, but I'm going to go back to plan and I'm going to show you as the last step of this video how to export this. And then I would go, and then for the next video, which we'll probably do next class, I will go over additional styling and details and all of that little extra special stuff. But once you have your site ready, or if you're trying to go to another area, like you're going to take this file and go to your home computer, you need to make sure you export your site. So we're going to go to File, Export as HTML, and it's going to say this document contains a link to an asset being unsampled. You should resize it smaller or right mouse click the asset. I'm not going to worry about that. I think that's the logo, and I'm going to click OK. It says, what's your domain name? You need to know what that's going to be, so you'll have to log into your student space and find that. In this case, I'm just going to put the domain name that I would already have. And it's important that you do this because this is how it determines how it's going to interact with that domain name, so you do want to put that there. I'm going to click OK. It's going to export. It's going to make a folder. It's going to show me the site in the browser, so it's going to show me everything. So you can see that actually opens a little differently here, so there's no issues with the size. You can see my sticky footer works. It all stays nicely centered. I can go to my navigation and go to my different sections, and I don't have an issue with it sort of forcing itself open. So that's totally fine. That all looks good. I can exit that, and then I just need to go find out where I saved it. So I actually didn't notice that. So when I go to export as HTML, I'm going to check. It looks like it's under Danielle Feliciano. Let's look at location, Muse export, right there. So it looks like it's under documents. I didn't check that. What I really should have done is selected a location, but I was a little distracted. So let's go find it. So it should be under documents, Muse export, and there is my full site. So in addition to that, you want to make sure that you bring the Muse file with you. So you want to bring both. However, you can just drag this in, I believe, and go straight into Muse. I'm not sure. Oh, maybe not. So you do need to bring the Muse file. It's a little different than it used to be. So bring the Muse file. You can see that it's exported all of the site. So I can once again open this straight from the index file. I also takes all my images that I use and it copies them over for me. So I didn't even have to go find any of those. It brought them over. It also has each page CSS. It creates CSS for each of the pages, and all of the JavaScript and PHP that was required. You didn't have to code any of that. All of that got written for you. And it also contains the sitemap, which is connected to this, and the Muse manifest, which is part of that as well. So everything is now exported. You can take this Muse export folder with you anywhere you want to go, and it will work. So that's all that you need. So from that stage on, you may have to relink stuff if you open this. So if I reopen that guy, I might have to relink it. But for the most part, that is all ready to go. I'm going to hit save, and it's going to say files locked, location is read-only, file has been renamed or moved. Yes, it did get moved. So instead, I can go to File Save As, and I can save that wherever I need to save it. Because I moved it before I saved it, it can't find it now. So I broke the link. That's really important to know. But other than that, that's where you need to get for your final site. So this export is where you'll want to be. In this case, I'm just going to move this back out where it was. And I'm going to delete the Muse export because I'm not actually finished with the site. But that's still an important thing to know for when you move back and forth from computers. It will repackage all of the images that you add and keep everything really neat and organized. So that is the end of that. In the next video, we'll do more styling and we'll actually sort of export everything, and I'll actually hopefully get the chance to talk about how to get this uploaded onto your student sites.